she came from. Kinda turned me upside down. I just don't know what to do. I wanna spend the night at hers and bring her one of my t-shirts, so it smells like her perfume. Now I really get what the love songs are talking about, and I just wanna tell her how I feel, scream it out loud. Have you ever been in love? Have you ever lost your head? Have you felt like you were out of breath when you saw her in that dress? When your heart is beating fast and you're sweating and you can't stop looking at her smile, then you've been in love. That's how you know you've been in love. There's something about the way she laughs and the way she always dances when she thinks nobody sees. And when she's gone I miss her so. I tell her, baby, please don't go. I think you should stay with me. And I really get what the love songs are talking about. Oh, and I just wanna tell her how I feel, scream it out loud. Have you ever been in love? Have you ever lost your head? Have you felt like you were out of breath when you saw her in that dress? When your heart is beating fast and you're sweating and you can't stop looking at her smile, then you've been in love. That's how you know you've been in love. Turn me upside down. I just don't know what to do. I wanna spend the night with her, bring her one of my t-shirts, so it smells like her perfume. Have you ever been in love? Have you ever lost your head? Have you felt like you were out of breath when you saw her in that dress? When your heart is beating fast and you're sweating and you can't stop looking at her smile, then you've been in love. That's how you know you've been in love.
You take my love for granted. Say a bunch of stuff you never mean, yeah. I think I need a minute to figure out my limits. You cross them more than once, yeah. You take my love for granted. We keep on talking from body just waste away. One more time is all we need. A bitter truth to face, not that innocent. We know what we did. I'm a sucker for your love, even though it's kinda toxic, babe. You know I feel it in my touch, that your love is from a different place. It's toxic, babe. Oh, it's toxic, babe. Yeah, yeah. It's toxic, babe.
They were in high school when they met, and things got kinda awkward. With sparks in the air, he would stare at her in class, and she would try to act cool. But it was obvious, like, ooh, they would be together, ooh. And one day she said, write me a love song, 'cause I know you'll make it beautiful. And maybe I'll call you my sweetheart, and promise nobody can steal me away. Then I am yours, 'cause I want you, and I wanted you to know. He looked at her and then he smiled, picked up a pen and paper, started writing. Probably something about her eyes and how they're always shining, or something cliche like ooh. Baby, I only want you. It's true. And then he said, I wrote you a love song, and I tried to make it beautiful. It's a song about your sweet, sweetheart, and how nobody can steal me away. Yeah, I am yours, 'cause I want you, and I wanted you to know. As he sang, she started to dance, grabbed his arm and took his hand. He held her close under the moonlight as they kept on dancing. And now they're singing their love song, and they sing it kind of beautiful, calling each other sweetheart. I promise nobody can get in their way or steal the show. They're in love now, and I wanted you to know.
I can never hit the brakes every time you touch me, babe. You send me right out into space. You send me right out into space. Right into space. I'm not the kind of person who is sentimental, but this thing is making me soft, giving in there's nothing I can do. No. When I'm with you, I lose myself. I feel good. Oh, yeah, I don't know why. It's like a charge around us that just feels right. Can't get my head around it. I can never hit the brakes. Every time you touch me, babe, you send me right out into space. You send me right out into space. Space, right into space. Yeah, I don't know why. It's like a charge around us that just feels right. Can't get my head around it. I can never hit the brakes. Every time you touch me, I wanna be a weekend lover. Yeah, I'ma be the best damn lover you got. I wanna mess up your covers. I don't wanna meet your mother. Never ever ask me how I've been. Remember why you have my number. I'm the best thing that has ever happened to you. Here's your time to shine. Now show me what you can do. The way my hands feel on your body, the way we're dancing in the dark. With every move I make, you're falling. The way my lips feel on your body, the way we're moving in the dark. With every breath we take, you're falling. I ain't got no time for romance, but baby, I don't want to lead you on. Not looking for something steady, not ready for that. I'm the best thing that has ever happened to you. Here's your time to shine. Now show me what you can do. Make a move. The way my hands feel on your body, the way we're dancing in the dark. With every move I make, you're falling. The way my lips feel on your body, the way we're moving in the dark. With every breath we take, you're falling. Every breath that we're taking, with every step you're falling in love. With every move that I'm making, every breath that we're taking, with every step you're falling in love. With every move that I'm making, I'm the best thing that has ever happened to you. Here's your time to shine. Now show me what you can do. Make a move. The way my hands feel on your body, the way we're dancing in the dark. With every move I make, you're falling. The way my lips feel on your body, the way we're moving in the dark. With every breath we take, you're falling. Every breath that we're taking, with every step you're falling in love. With every move that I'm making, every breath that we're taking, with every step you're falling in love. With every move that I'm making,
All my thoughts are running round inside my head. Emotions keep coming, they're keeping me from thinking straight. Thought it would be different when I got my things in place. Stuck in this commotion, how come I ain't past this yet? I wanted me to be somebody else, another me that doesn't need your help. But if I'm honest, I don't think we got it. I try to change the things you never liked, try to make this better, make this right, but we're the same, even though I changed. Really made an effort, promised I would change, but something stayed the same. Wanted to do better, wanted to be great, but something stayed the same. Something stayed the same. Something stayed the same. Start a life in the country, I could say yes to that. Whatever way you want me, I'll learn it all and I'll adapt. Even if I changed up, everything except my name. We will still be Friday, 'cause I am still the same. I wanted me to be somebody else, another me that doesn't need your help. But if I'm honest, I don't think we got it. I tried to change the things you never liked, try to make this better, make this right, but we're the same, even though I changed. Really made an effort, promised I would change, but something stayed the same. Wanted to do better, wanted to be great, but something stayed the same. Something stayed the same. Something stayed the same. I can change the way I am, the way I talk, the way I stand. It doesn't really matter, 'cause I'll still be the same. I can change the way I am, the way I talk, the way I stand. It doesn't really matter, 'cause I'll still be the same. Really made an effort, promised I would change, but some things stayed the same. Wanted to do better, wanted to be great, but some things stayed the same.
Come hit me up, we'll light it up. Pour some shots, get on, get naughty. I'll set you up, promise I'll get you up. The two of us, starting off with your body. Oh hell, oh well, I'll make you feel it again. Oh hell, oh well, don't stop unless you pretend. Oh hell, oh well, we're naked, touching my skin. Oh hell, oh, getting lost inside ourselves. One look at you was not enough. You know how to play it and you play it rough. We be going up, we fit like the doves, our hand in a glove. You and I, we got something even people can't find with luck. Our own domain of secret love. We got it going and we're going on. Waking up at 6 o'clock, and I fill you up. We're getting hot, yeah. The nights are blurred, but I remember you for sure. Over the furniture, we gave it all, we exhausted. Oh hell, oh well, I'll make you feel it again. Oh hell, oh well, don't stop unless you pretend. One look at you was not enough. You know how to play it and you play it rough. We be going up, we fit like the doves, our hand in a glove. You and I, we got something even people can't find with luck. Our own domain of secret love. We got it going and we're going on. Oh hell, oh well, we fit like the doves, our hand in a glove. Oh hell, oh well, we got it going and we're going on. Oh hell, oh well, I'll make you feel it again. Oh hell, oh well, don't stop unless you pretend. Oh hell, oh well, I'll make you feel it again. Oh hell, oh well, don't stop unless you pretend. Just one look at you was not enough. You know how to play it and you play it rough. We be going up, we fit like the doves, our hand in a glove. You and I, we got something even people can't find with luck. Our own domain of secret love. We got it going and we're going on. Never thought I'd be so far from home. Never thought our love could grow so cold. Never thought we had to run through burning fire. Never thought I had to miss you and I. Life changes as we know it. You do what you can, you just get through it. It's a mystery
yours. It was never on the map, on this crooked road called life. It was never meant to be you and I. Never thought I'd be so far from home. Never thought our love could grow so cold. Never thought we had to run through burning fire. Never thought I had to miss you and I. Never thought I'd be so far from home. Never thought our love could grow so cold.
The old me, when I'm stuck here on planet X, I'll become the person I've hated. Wonder what will happen next. Yeah, I don't know why. It's like a charge around us that just feels right. Can't get my head around it. I can never hit the brakes. Every time you touch me, babe, you send me right out into space. You send me right out into space. Right into space. My head tells me to stop, but there is nothing I can do. No. When I'm with you, I lose myself. I feel good. Oh, yeah, I don't know why. It's like a charge around us that just feels right. Can't get my head around it. I can never hit the brakes. Every time you touch me, babe, you send me right out into space. You send me right out into space. Right into space. Yeah, I don't know why. It's like a charge around us that just feels right. Can't get my head around it.
Show ya. Wish for me to call you when you're turning me on. The way you telling me you wanted me down. Done it, I done this before you fall. I won't catch you, don't know I'm stalling. Cause you love to have them all crying. Calling me sweet, telling me you need me. But I'm from a city that's high school. I give them this and the more I go. Cause you a bad man, she don't love money. She break grass real fast like conman. Wanna swim down to the deep end. Wanna know all my secrets, honestly. Can you keep it real? Cause honestly, I can tell that you're real fond of me. Baby, don't be shy, I can see it in your eyes. I've been running around. Too bad, I've been sticking out your mind. I know you like it how I rock it from behind. I don't understand you, how you taking all my time. Left, right, can you take it all night? Too bad, I've been sticking out your mind. I know you like it how I rock it from behind. I don't understand you, how you taking all my time. Left, right, can you take it all night? Take it, baby, I ain't scared to take it. Oh, and maybe when I take it, oh, I feel it coming down too strong. Cause I want ya, and it's hard to resist. Cause I need ya, and it's hard, baby, yeah, cause I believe ya. Hold me tight, holding on tonight. Holding a couple, no get to you clean and proper. Way I move, I know you can love her. You gon' have me on your mind forever, ever. Likes, baby, turn it down like a sweet and ready. Go slow, keep it nice and steady. Know that you've been keeping patience. Too bad I've been sticking out your mind. I know you like it how I
I just wanna love you a little bit more. Don't just walk away from me and close the door. Baby, pull me closer now before it's over. I just wanna love you a little bit more. Oh, love you a little bit more. 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 How do you move on when everything is wrong? I'm trying to find a way to get you out my head. Don't know how to cope with being so broken. Girl, I can't forget about what you said. I just wanna love you a little bit more. Don't just walk away from me and close the door. Baby, pull me closer now before it's over. I just wanna love you a little bit more. Oh, love you a little bit more. Just a little bit. Love you a little bit more. Love you a little bit more.
You wanna ride on my wave just because it's fun. You wanna be in my space, too close to the sun. Don't seem to care if it's safe. Well, that makes two of us. I'm so insane, and you like it. But you haven't seen anything yet. Now you're just beginning your trip to regrets. You might think you know me, but soon you forget. I'm too insane, and you know it. You got to learn to like me again and again, 'cause I will make you love me again and again. Just when you think you love me, you'll think again, 'cause I will make you hate me again and again. I'll say I'm fine when I'm not, just to mess you up. I won't be home when you want, and I won't pick up. You'll spend your time with your watch, counting down the clock. You'll go insane, and I like it. But you haven't seen all of me yet. Now I'm just beginning your work in progress. You might think you know me, but soon you forget. I'm too insane, and you know it. You got to learn to like me again and again, 'cause I will make you love me again and again. Just when you think you love me, you'll think again, 'cause I will make you hate me again and again. Again and again. Again and again. You wanna ride on my wave just because it's fun. You wanna be in my space, too close to the sun. Don't seem to care if it's safe. Well, that makes two of us. I'm so insane, and you like it. You got to learn to like me again and again, 'cause I will make you love me again and again. Just when you think you love me, you'll think again, 'cause I will make you hate me again and again.